Hey there, right now, great pleasure to welcome on our Book Talk segment right now. A woman who's written a very interesting, it's called a historical novel, but it's based on something that really happened back in World War I. Really little known, but a true story of something called the Alice Network. We'll find out more about that. We're joined by the author today, Kate Quinn. She's, I believe, based out of Maryland, aren't you, Kate?
Yep, that's where I am.
I know you grew up in Southern California, so you moved across the country, so that's a bit of a change for you, right?
Yes, I was in Boston for college, and then I ended up marrying an active-duty Navy man. So now we are moving around the country a bit, but I'm a writer, and as long as I have a laptop and an internet connection, I'm in business.
That's the good thing about our type of work. You don't have to live in a specific area, right?
Oh, yes.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the book. It's getting a lot of good press. I know it just came out in the last week or so, but now I have to say I had not heard about the Alice Network, but it's World War I. Just to kind of give a quick overview of it, it was a woman who kind of put a group together called, she was called the Queen of Spies, right? She had a network of a bunch of people in France that helped smuggle soldiers behind enemy lines. Very interesting story.
Yes, the Alice Network was a ring of spies in World War I, and many of them were women, and they risked their lives facing death by firing squad from the German enemies and facing from their own side a certain amount of condescension and double standards as women who were fighting in a man's war. It was a really fascinating story, and when I came across it, I thought it deserved to be told.
Yeah, how did you come across it? Or were you just kind of doing research on something else and found out about it, or what drew you to that?
I was reading a lovely nonfiction book called Women Heroes of World War I by Catherine Atwood, and it had a number of marvelous stories that I'd never heard of before as far as women in that part of the century. When we think of women in World War I, we think of battlefield nurses usually, but here I was reading about journalists and women who were soldiers even on the Russian front, and ultimately also spies. There were 100 stories that could have been told, but this was the one that grabbed my imagination the hardest.
Yeah, you're right. You think World War II, you heard about Army nurses or some woman got into the Air Force, WACs, I think they used to call them, but you didn't hear too much about World War I women involved. So
not so much.
Yeah. Now this book, again, it's a story you kind of imagined around it, and it sort of encompasses both world wars, right? From mid-1940s, and then kind of a flashback. I don't want to give away too much, but give us a little overview of what happened.
We have three travelers on an unlikely road trip, all of them grappling with World War wounds and struggling to find their places in the New World. Two of them are women, one a battle-scarred former spy, and the other a pregnant American college girl, and they've joined forces to pursue a common enemy through post-World War II Europe. I like to think of it as courage, redemption, old war wounds, and a road trip to the French countryside in a classic convertible.
Yeah, it's got kind of an interesting way of writing, because you're writing in two different eras, aren't you?
Yes, I like doing a dual timeline. It was a way to show that there were parallels, that these women who had very little in common at first sight actually had undergone some similar experiences. And it was a way to show historically how there were traumas and wounds that started in World War I and then carried through silently and buried all the way through to World War II and flowered all over again. Those two conflicts are much more connected, I think, than they are sometimes thought to be.
Yeah, you kind of think that they took place, such a long time apart, but really 30 years, maybe even less in part of Europe, that those two wars, between one ending and another one kind of beginning, right? Late 30s, really, in Europe. Before we got involved, it was maybe 35 years, but that's not that long a time, is it?
It really isn't. And, there's a lot of jokes, of course, about the French and, surrender jokes. Just Google it. You'll find a billion. But what people don't remember is that when France saw the Nazis on the horizon, they had extremely recent and extremely concrete, very painful memories of the last time that they had been invaded and held by German armies. And that was such painful memories and really not very far in the past at all. So that played a huge role in the French mindset just going into World War II before even the shot was fired.
And getting back to the actual person, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Louise de Bettigny, is that how you pronounce her name?
Yes, it's Louise de Bettigny. She was the founder of the Alice Network. She was recruited by British intelligence to go back to the occupied zone and sort of form her network of sources, and she did. And she was spectacularly successful at it. She was so reliable and so fast with her intelligence that the British intelligence who had recruited her absolutely gushed over how good she was, and they gave her the nickname of the Queen of Spies.
And just kind of, what she did was, like spy stuff from the 60s or even currently today, how they smuggled some of those coded messages, right, inside umbrellas and heels of the shoe, hairpins. Interesting way that they did all that stuff even back then. You wouldn't think they would have thought of that.
Yes, it's much more low tech. There's nothing on computer back then, certainly, and there weren't even, complicated coding machines required like the way that it was in World War II. But you had to be very clever because the Germans did not allow printed material to leave the occupied zone, and they could be very nasty at their checkpoints if they found people violating that rule. So the sources, if they had information to smuggle, got very creative with, messages wrapped around hairpins and around the bands inside rings and underneath cakes in cake boxes. There was a fun story about how Louise, when she was crossing a border, had a message tucked between the pages of a magazine, which she dropped accidentally in front of a soldier. And the German soldier picked it up and politely handed it back to her, which she said was very considerate of him.
And isn't the story that they almost, the Alice Network, nearly had a chance to bomb the Kaiser's train, right? Just didn't quite work out, right?
Yes, a real-life bit of intelligence they uncovered was date and time and train when the Kaiser was coming to inspect the front in France. And so they made arrangements that the British flying services would bomb the train, and if they had succeeded, that would have been a very different war, very possibly a shorter one. Now, unfortunately, bombing a train track is not very high-tech when you're flying a wooden and cloth monoplane or biplane. So the attack did not succeed, but the intelligence is real, and there was a very real possibility right there that the whole war could have changed on the dot.
Yeah, a great turning point, perhaps, in history, not just the war, but what followed that. But again, the book, based on a lot of true things, but you of course, imagine a great story around it. Is that fun as an author? You take what happened and then kind of put a fictionalized story around it. That must be kind of an interesting challenge as a writer, right?
It's what I like doing best. I like to hang a fictional story or character on a real historical framework. And the fun part for that is that I do have historical figures here. Louise de Bettigny is a secondary character. But the thing is, with the reader, whenever they want, they can go to Wikipedia and Google her or find out what happened to her. And it's fun when I have my fictional characters that the reader is going to be left in suspense. They don't know what happens to these people. So it's a way to wind in the fictional and the nonfiction and to keep tension a little bit high. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great story and suspense within it, and would make, I would imagine, a great movie, and I would hope you're going to get some offers on that as well, to make it into a movie. Have you? Or will you?
Well, fingers crossed.
Well, the name of the book is called The Alice Network, and as we head, of course, into the summer season now, people are looking for great reads at the beach or wherever you might be, and this is definitely on that list. And Kate Quinn has been our guest. Kate, do you want to give out a website if you have one? Get more information. People get more information about the book.
Yes, if you'd like to find out where it's being sold, find an excerpt, see if you like it. It's easily found at my website, katequinnauthor.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and Twitter.
Great. Kate, pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll hopefully talk to you again.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Glad you had me.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or DougMilesMedia.com.